Aloha, and thank you for watching the Fontaine Factor. I'm Representative George Fontaine from South Maui, and today's show we're going to be talking about smart grids, electric vehicles, and photovoltaic systems. And I have two wonderful guests for the show today to talk about this subject matter, because there's a lot of things that are going on in the state of Hawaii, and in particular on the island of Maui with regards to smart grids and projects that are going forward to hopefully ultimately provide cheaper power and more accessibility and getting us off fossil fuels by 2030. So first I'd like to introduce Marc Matsuura. He's with the Hawaiian Electric Company, and he's part of the smart grid planning. And also joining us today is Mr. Marc Glick. He's from the Hawaii State Energy Office, Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's talk about this whole issue maybe up from the 30,000 foot level and look and see where we're going with this. Now, I understand there was a partnership that was formed between Japan and Maui, or I guess the United States, but in particular doing the project on Maui. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how did it come about and where is it going?
Sure. The original impetus for this was a pretty groundbreaking agreement in Okinawa between the U.S. government, U.S. Department of Energy, and the state of Hawaii, and METI, which is part of the Japanese government. And that led to a whole host of activities that we agreed to cooperate, particularly in clean energy. Emanating from that was an effort by a part of METI called New Energy and Industrial Technology Division organization. And that is NETO, is the abbreviation for that.
And so that's New Energy
and Industrial Technology Division, or Development Organization.
Okay.
And so NETO had worked with a number of companies in Japan that were testing new technologies, and decided that under this broad agreement, this would be an ideal test place or a test bed for this new technology.
Yeah, and then part of that agreement was an agreement to work on clean energy technologies in general. But then there was a task force that put together a list of things in particular that we wanted to work on, and one of them was the Okinawa-Hawaii Smart Grid Technologies Partnership. So,
and then,
excellent.
And then in November of this past year, NETO and the state of Hawaii, Governor Abercrombie, actually signed an agreement for this specific Maui project that emanated from that.
I was there, yeah. It was
and
great.
You were there, yeah. So it was, very exciting.
Yeah, so we worked with NATO, the Japan organization, to come up with a plan of what kind of technologies we wanted to place into this smart grid pilot. So we came up with a proposed set of objectives that we wanted to reach, and they went out to the Japanese industry with a request for proposals and selected Hitachi as their contractor to implement the Japanese technologies.
Okay. Marc, why don't you lead us through? We have some slides that we're going to show you folks, and maybe you can kind of talk about what these are all on. And
Okay. Yeah. So in general, the Japan government is investing approximately $37 million in this project, and we do have local partners, Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, State of Hawaii, Maui Economic Development Board, and others that are working with us. But the objectives are to look at ways to help manage issues related to photovoltaics on the grid, EVs being added to the grid.
Can we go back, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And looking at technologies to help to enable people putting technologies such as like those on the grid as they would like to, but then having the ability to manage it and use it in a way that's helpful to the grid.
Okay, and so for the folks at home, if you're not familiar what PV is or EV, why don't you explain that, because people...
Yeah, so PV is
Can you put the slides back up?
Kind of a shorthand way of saying photovoltaic system. So it's a technology that uses sunlight and converts it into energy or power that then's connected to the grid. EVs again is a term for electric vehicles. So it's the vehicles that you would plug in, getting energy from the grid and then using that for transportation rather than gasoline.
Perfect. And then you have battery storage systems, and that would be, what would that be?
Yeah, so the battery storage systems that are being proposed for this project are ones that Hitachi has, that they have available. So for this project, it's being used to kind of mimic the EV charging, because we don't have a whole lot of electric vehicles right at this point, but we want to test technologies that would help us manage them. So the batteries are going in and being used to charge off the grid as an EV would, and then the control systems would then send signals to it to mimic how we would send control signals to electric vehicles to manage their charging.
And because electric vehicles have such a big role, presumed role in meeting our transportation goals under the Clean Energy Initiative, the project planners are presuming that large numbers of EVs will be on a system. And so for a small isolated grid like Maui, it really gives the opportunity to take a real hard look at how will all of these vehicles impact the grid, and maybe how can it be managed better, maybe even automatically, to be able to shift demand from time periods throughout the day.
So then maybe another, maybe more discussion on why we picked Maui. But like you said, there's a lot of things going on in Maui, and one reason is that we have 2 more wind farms that are going to be coming online within the next couple of years. So there's going to be a lot of wind energy on that system that at some times we won't be able to take all of it. So there's an opportunity to make more use of that wind energy. And also at the same time, there's been exponential growth in the PV, photovoltaic systems being put on Maui. So we see that coming as maybe another issue that we'd have to deal with soon. So we want to develop technologies to help use more of the renewable energy and enable even more of it to come on.
Now this project you folks are going to put up, let's see, there's a slide for I think the 5 EV chargers that are being and potential locations that are going to be having these charging stations. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this shows, it's more of an indication of areas that we were looking at. The locations of the actual charging stations themselves are still being developed. But for this project, the project has a budget that would allow for five quick charging stations, and these are what they call level 3 charging stations. So it's charging stations that for cars that have there's a DC charging port. If you have that on your vehicle, it can charge it within 20 minutes or so.
Right.
Whereas the level 2 chargers that are maybe more like in where you have in your home or at a business, it takes some hours maybe to fully charge a vehicle.
Yeah, so the rapid one's charging like 30 minutes. Yeah, 30 minutes. Now, is part of this project, as I understand it, is to include having some electric vehicles being provided by rent-a-car to the rent-a-car companies? Is that correct, or?
Yeah, under this program, it's anticipated that as many as 100 EVs and locations feeds into this smart grid system will take place from the rental side, and then another 60 actually from the individual side, from just individual drivers at home.
Okay, because I was looking at the location. If you could bring that slide back up again, I don't see any stations being planned out for HANA. So I guess if you or somebody was renting a car, because I don't believe the range is much more than, what, 100 miles with the EV cars, or is that correct or not?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I think this is just it's illustrative of putting charging stations out there, but the locations are still being talked about. But one issue that we've discussed with Hitachi and Japan partners is if you're going to commit to put one charging station in HANA, you would probably need another one in intermediate. So you would have to commit to 2 to get to HANA. So that's something we have to look at.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at the smart grid slide. You can talk about that.
Okay. People always ask me, well, what is the smart grid, right? I mean, and it is a difficult thing to describe because it's a very broad term. But basically, the slide just shows that on the top part is there's an electrical infrastructure that's been, the technology has been around for a long time, and it's just basically there to distribute electrical energy from the power station out to our customers, right? But recently, the development of communications technology and information technology has been growing rapidly. So it's at a point where we want to look at taking those new technologies and applying them to the grid technologies to help enable, the grid to do more what it's being asked to do more. You connect,
Right.
Generation out on the end at the customer level, having more, like electric vehicles plugged in and things like that. That wasn't really contemplated with the initial deployment. So
if we could put that slide back up. Now the information infrastructure below is actually what's the intelligent part, correct?
Right.
So that's the part where there's a two-way communication going on between photovoltaic systems through transformers about load and those kinds of things. Is that correct?
Right. So right now we don't have a grid that's done, but we have a smart grid out to a point.
Right.
So it's maybe out to the neighborhood level, or
Right.
even less than that. But getting information out from the neighborhood level and figuring out what's going on there, and then managing resources out at that level is what's going to be needed to enable these new uses of the grid to come on.
Okay, so just to be clear for everyone, this project is not the same project that's being done up in Maui Meadows, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
because there's been, I think, some crossover thinking that it was all the same thing, but this is actually something completely different. I also wanted to make a point too, and we brought it up on the other show when we talked about the smart grid project up in Maui Meadows, about the safety of the radio waves that come off of these equipments, because I've gotten emails from all kinds of people saying, you're putting electrodes into the ocean and it's hurting the whales, to I'm going to get brain cancer, you folks got to stop doing that. And I've believe me, I've gotten several emails from people who, in fact, I believe there's even a petition now, and I don't know why I'm the recipient of that petition, but there's a petition to stop smart grids on Maui. And because I have been such an advocate for embracing new technology as a way of really bringing costs down ultimately for consumers and hopefully making their electric bill less. And it is the wave of the future. We can't stick our heads in the sand and continue to do things the same way we've done them. We have to do things in a way that is safe for people and not throw the environment under the bus, but at the same token, we need to get information out there. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, we live in a technology society, right? So there's a lot of devices in the home, like cell phones, your cordless regular phone, your baby monitors, things that have radios in them that are sending signals and helping you to communicate and run your life. So this is another device that uses radio waves similar to those types of appliances. And they're all regulated by the FCC, so that they're within regulated.
So it's the same like if you had a home wireless router.
Wireless router is another one.
Or you're talking on the cell phone. Although there was some concern about talking on cell phones. I remember, when I did the show, I think, Dr. Griffiths. No,
Jay Griffin.
He said you could, put your head and sleep on one of these things, and
it would be less.
And I think the most important thing that everybody needs to understand is that nobody in your project, as is with the Maui Meadows project, is being forced to have anything to do with this.
Right.
I mean, it's an opt-in if you want to participate in the program. Obviously, we're looking to get as many people as we can. I'm sure to put their names out there and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of this, and be on the cutting edge. But it's an opt-in.
Right. Right. So we're looking for volunteers to come in, and there is information. I think you had Dr. Griffin on your show talking about his project. They have a website.
Right.
They have a lot of resources on that website where you can go look at studies that were done, and there's a graph showing compared to cell phones and microwaves and other things in your home where the smart meter emissions look like.
Okay.
So they're much less. They're more intermittent because they don't have to be continuously communicating all the time. So when they have data that they need to transmit, they can turn on, send it on, and shut down a bit. But those graphs showed kind of the worst case of if it was on all the time, what it would be, and it's still pretty low compared to some other.
Well,
sources.
I know. I recently last summer purchased a new refrigerator freezer, and part of it was a Samsung. And part of one of the features on it is it actually had an antenna that actually, if there was a smart grid available, and I guess this was part of an accessory that when they sell these refrigerators in Japan are able to talk to their grid, and the refrigerator was actually able to communicate, I guess, with the grid when it had a lot of demand to let the utility know that it was cranking to keep the food cold. And obviously it's not working now, but I see eventually, you know, we will be looking at appliances. And then of course that brings in the whole concern about privacy, which we discussed last time, and the efforts to do the privacy. And I know that was discussed at one of the summits before we signed the Memorandum of Understanding on Maui. I know there was a discussion by the security. Can you speak a little bit, because I know that's another concern for my constituents.
On the privacy side, yeah. So, you know, like any business, we have consumer information, our customers' data. So that's something, even today, we have, you know, we protect that data, and we have requirements to protect that data. And that's going to continue with the smart grid. It's just we're getting a little bit more information at a more granular level, rather than a monthly, you know, bill. We can get more, you know, 15-minute or half an hour type of interval data. So we're going to get more data, but it'll still be customer data that we have to protect.
Okay. Folks, if you're just joining us right now, we're talking about smart grids, PVs, and electric vehicles. And joining me on the show today is Mr. Marc Matsuura and Mr. Marc Glick. Marc Glick is from DBEDT and State Energy Office, and Marc Matsuura is with Hawaiian Electric, the Smart Grid Planning Division. And we're discussing this fantastic project that's happening on Maui. So let's continue and talk about the electric charging stations themselves. I think we have a slide of that, of how that works. Can you bring that slide up? And what your issues are now that you're having to deal with the addition of these vehicles.
Yeah, so this kind of shows one of the issues that we're going to be trying to avoid, I guess, as we say, where the yellow part of the graph kind of shows where if you added a bunch of, you know, fleet of electric vehicles to your grid and they all kind of charge at a time when you get home, everybody charges at the same time, you can actually drive the energy usage higher at that time, which puts more stress on the grid. And we would have to maybe put in more infrastructure to support that higher demand, which would drive up cost. But if we can do it in a smarter way where we shift load, actually I think the green shows a little bit of the shifting where you charge off peak and then, you know, reduce the peak on peak. You can eliminate that concern.
And I don't think the folks at home can see what the numbers are in the bottom of the graph. That peak is around 8 o'clock at night, am I correct?
Yeah, our peaks are in the evening. You know, people get home, they start cooking dinner, taking baths, all that kind of thing.
And of course the sun is down, so the PV doesn't work.
Yeah, no PV at that time. But in addition, you know, to avoiding that issue, what we want to do is then take another step and say, well, we can actually use that load when they are charging to help manage the wind or, you know, PV fluctuations on the grid, and maybe not run conventional generation as much to try to make up the difference for when the wind goes away. So we can use some of the load to do that.
Okay. I think we have some pictures to show. I want to get everybody a real understanding, because there's electric vehicles, and then we have hybrids, and then we have like hybrid electric vehicles. I think there's like 3 different kinds, and I'm not sure if everyone understands. So this is an example of a pure electric vehicle, is that correct? That just uses a charging station.
That's the new Mitsubishi i.
Okay.
And that runs completely, it usually has like a 4 to 5 volt battery. And it's something that is, because there's the total absence of an internal combustion engine inside that power plant that you're looking at, that there's no sound. So the car has absolutely 0 sound. You step into it, you press a button, and when it's operating, you cannot really tell.
Wow. Now, what about pedestrians? Because, I mean, I heard talk that they might even put some kind of engine of noise so that people would be aware that the car something was approaching them.
Yeah, I thought that would be interesting if you could get like a ringtone for your phone. You could get a kind of a sound for your car.
Yeah.
They built internally, they built some of those noises so that the driver actually can navigate.
Yeah.
You know, because
and he knows the vehicle is on. He doesn't get out and forget to turn it off or something along that line.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put up some of the other pictures. I think we have some other models to show too.
Nissan Leaf, that's another total electric vehicle, 100% battery, what we call plug-in electric vehicle. and just came out last year by the Nissan Corporation.
Okay, so that's what it looks like to charge it. So it's not like you're plugging in an extension cord into this thing. You actually are plugging a actual physical device.
So it depends on the level of charging you want. I think this picture is showing there's 2 ports in the Leaf. One is a level 2 charger, and the other one's a level 3. So the level 2 is a smaller plug. The level 3 is a little bigger, but it charges quicker.
So if you own an electric vehicle, does it come with a home charger, or do you have to purchase that separately?
It's like an option. You know, you have to add it separately. Because of that, and because of the importance of having charging, particularly at home, the Department of Business and Economic Development and Tourism, using Recovery Act money, set up what we call EV Ready grant program. So it covers $4,500 for a rebate for the purchase of a plug-in electric vehicle, the kind that is not a hybrid, one that uses 100% electricity from a plug-in source, and also a smaller rebate for the installation of a level 2 charger at home.
Okay.
And the level 2 charger is really an all-night charger to give you a full operating range.
Right.
And so far, we don't have any plans to really focus on faster chargers, but you could use the rebate if you wanted to pay as much as $10,000 for a level 3 charger to install those, if your home could actually deal with the additional power capacity, because it sucks a lot of energy.
Yeah. No. So how much does it cost? You know, now equating it to a gallon of gas. You know, is it more expensive to run an electric vehicle if you didn't have PV in your house and you're just taking it from the grid and plugging it into your home? Do you see a savings in your pocketbook?
Yeah. I mean, at current rates, depending on whether you have a compact car or whether you have a gas guzzler car, but for something that gets about 30 miles a gallon, I think you're looking at the difference between 10 cents per mile for a electric vehicle and 15 cents or 16 cents per mile for something that gets in the range of 30 miles per gallon.
Really?
Yeah, so it's actually cheaper to operate. It's significant savings. It's more like a 10-cent saving per mile if it's like 20 mile per gallon automobile.
Amazing. Well, my big gas guzzler, I'm seriously thinking about it. Now, you folks have extended the rebates, right? So
yes.
it did expire, I guess, March 30th, but now it's been extended until November.
What we were able to do was we actually saw the demand, and we were issuing maybe $70,000, $80,000 in rebates a month over the life of the program. It was roughly a $2.9 million grant program, and we decided to add $500,000 additional funds through November, and out of that, I think we have just a little more than $300,000 remaining. So
it's first come, first serve.
First come, first serve.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to have to get off my duff and go look at that car again. I was really seriously thinking about it because my vehicle right now gets about 14 miles to the gallon. And I was worried about going into electric because I see how high my electric bill already with Maui Electric is, and thought, gee, I'm going to be paying, you know, through the nose and not really get any benefit. I mean, it would be good for the environment and all that to go electric, but would I really see any savings? So rather than paying Maui Oil, I'll be paying MECO for my energy and for my transportation needs. So I'll see you say.
And if you charge off peak, I mean, you'd be using wind energy more than oil at that point. If we're curtailing wind at the time, it would help build load.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, right now we're in the transition phase, so you're still plugging into something that's generated primarily from low sulfur fuel oil, but over time you will be much greener all the way around, life cycle, by plugging in. And it just points out that gasoline and diesel as automotive fuels are much more costly on a relative energy basis than the power generated for electricity, because of we're importing all of that oil. So we're either putting oil into a refinery to turn it into gasoline or diesel, or to turn it into a boiler fuel for power plants. And
so the average cost of the vehicle is, say, 30,000 for a Leaf. I'm not sure what the price is, but I'm just trying to look at, and then the rebates add up. I was looking at your press release. It seems like there was a total of about 12,000 that you could potentially get for the purchase of that electric vehicle. So essentially, you'd have a good chunk of the cost or the outlay of purchasing that vehicle to be offset by these rebates if they got in time and applied for them.
That's right. You need to certainly get in the hopper, order your vehicle, because the automobile dealers are actually selling out of these. So as soon as they get them there, they're selling them.
Well, I was looking at the hybrid, and the hybrid is a combination of gas and the electric, and it got about 40 miles to the gallon. But I was looking at that because I was so concerned about the lack of charging stations and then getting stuck somewhere. But I'm so glad that you folks are doing this project, and hopefully we'll get the expansion of more power stations or charging stations, not only on Maui, but on Oahu as well, and it will really be an advantage.
So look at getting the quick charging option too, because that I think is an option. It doesn't always.
And we passed some legislation to provide property owners or parking lots to having more charging stations available for the general public, so they're not driving around and being so anxious. Believe it or not, I have less than a minute left.
Hard to believe.
We went by fast. I told you it would. Is there anything you folks want to plug? You said you had an upcoming expo?
Yeah, every year we now do the Asia Pacific Clean Energy Expo and Summit and Expo. That's going to be held at the Convention Center August 15th through 17th. So please look to our website, energy.hawaii.gov, energy.hawaii.gov. For more details about that. That's coming up in August.
Okay. And that's average consumer would find it fascinating and like to attend that?
Yeah, businesses, consumers, it basically covers the whole gamut of renewable energy options.
Great way to learn about all of this, what we discussed.
That's right.
Thank you guys so much for coming on. It was a great show. I hope to have you guys on again, and you can give us an update as to how things are going. So folks, thank you for watching. If you have any letters, comments, or concerns, please write me, repfontaine@capital.hawaii.gov, repfontaine@hawaii.capital.gov. Again, thank you for watching.